What does your dream retirement look like? And how do you plan to achieve it? Hey everyone, Daniel here from Next Level Life, and today we're going to be covering Chris Hogan's book entitled Retire Inspired. Now this summary is going to be a bit of an overview of the book because there's really a lot of good information in it. In fact, if you're new to investing and retirement planning in general, and if you're looking for a book on retirement, it's probably the best one that I can recommend. This is because not only does it cover some of the obstacles that you're going to face on your path to retirement, but it also kind of covers the basics of investing for retirement, and debt, and just a lot of great subjects that I can't cover all in one video because that would probably be an hour long. So as always, I'll leave a link to the book in the description below if you want to check out the full thing for yourself. And again, if you're looking for a book on retirement, I highly recommend it. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about where our modern idea of retirement came from, as well as the obstacles that you will be facing on your way to your inspired retirement. And of course, I'll also be talking about the 5 fundamentals for setting up your inspired retirement. Let's get started. So first things first, where did our modern idea of retirement come from? When did we decide that retirement would be at age 65? When did that become a thing? Well, as it turns out, it came from Social Security, because the Social Security Act of 1935 recognized 65 years old as the normal age for retirement in the US. Now that may have made sense in the 30s, because the average life expectancy was 60 back then, so most people that made it to retirement wouldn't be drawing on their Social Security for very long. But today, the average life expectancy is closer to 80, which is part of the reason why Social Security is in trouble. People are simply living longer, and as a result, more people than ever before are drawing on Social Security. It's gotten to the point where many people don't believe that Social Security will be around for them when they retire. And you can see why that is. For example, did you know that today, close to 35% of American retirees over the age of 65 rely almost entirely on Social Security to fund their retirement? And did you also know that the average payment for Social Security is $1,194 a month? That means that a third of retired Americans are living on just over $14,000 a year. That's crazy. But wait, it gets worse, because between right now and the year 2030, it is estimated that about 10,000 baby boomers will be retiring every single day. How is Social Security going to keep up with that? In short, it probably isn't. And that has changed how we must plan for our own retirements. Well, that and the introduction of the 401k. It may be hard to believe for some of my younger viewers, but 401ks have not been around for very long. 401ks were actually introduced with the Revenue Act of 1978. This is important to note because before 1978, companies used to save for your retirement for you through pension plans. And while it's true that a very select few places still do offer pension plans, it's becoming more and more rare by the day. Now the responsibility for saving for your retirement rests almost entirely on your own shoulders. And the adjustment has been a little bit less than smooth for most of us, because we're facing problems that we've never had to deal with before. This brings me to the 4, or 5, depending on how you look at it, obstacles to an inspired retirement. The obstacles, in no particular order, are our misunderstanding of the word retirement itself, our depending on Social Security to fund our retirements, our tendency to act like sheep, and us just not really having a solid plan for retirement to begin with. You see, when most people think of the word retirement, they think the end. This is because it's been drilled into us that you retire once you reach the age of 65 or 67 or whatever it ends up being when you get there. However, if you watch my video on savings rates, you know that that doesn't necessarily have to be the case for you. You can retire whenever you want, because retirement is not an age, it's a financial number. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are a little skeptical right now, so I'll just use an example to explain what I mean. Take Joe. Joe is 50 years old and he has $500,000 in retirement savings. And say Joe lives on $30,000 a year. If Joe was able to average an 8% return over the next 30 years, which is not a stretch at all as we've discovered in my previous videos on this channel, he could actually retire right now. Even if you assume that he increased his expenses every year by 3% to keep up with inflation. So yeah, retirement has nothing to do with age. It's all about how much money you saved and how much money you spend. Moving along, depending on Social Security is obviously an obstacle because, well, as I already stated, the people who are living off of it aren't really getting that much to begin with. I mean, be honest, how many of you are actually living on $14,000 a year? And how many of you would want to do that during your golden years? What's that? Nobody? I thought not. It's not a very inspired retirement to say the least. The point is, you can't really count on Social Security to fund your retirement. If you get it, then that's great, but it should be icing on the cake and nothing more. The last two obstacles kind of go hand in hand. According to some studies, half of 401k participants have saved less than $10,000 for retirement, and a third of the participants have less than $1,000. This is primarily because we don't have a plan, and as a result, we act like sheep and just do whatever the people around us are doing, which, again, just look at the numbers. It's usually not a good thing to do with your money. But that raises the question, why don't most of us have a plan? I believe it comes down to the emotions that are usually tied into the idea of retirement and personal finance as a whole. Most of us don't have a very thorough education in personal finance. After all, it's not something that was taught to everyone in school. And as a result, when we know we should have some money saved, but we don't, we start feeling guilt and shame, and that makes it very hard to act the way we logically know that we should. Another feeling that comes up as a result of our rather lacking financial education is cynicism. You see, the media can make a ton of money off of stories about how the market is going to crash, or how it's not going to do as well as before. Similar to how they can make a lot of money off of tragic stories, which is why death and destruction is usually the first things you see on the news. They're just a lot more gripping than everything will be okay type of stories. But as a result, our main source of financial knowledge comes from a place that tends to focus a little bit more strongly on the negative than the positive. And many of us no longer feel comfortable investing because of the uncertainty about the market's future that this coverage creates. And that uncertainty also leads to fear, which makes it even tougher to act in the way that we know that we should. And the longer that we fail to act, the more regret that we have, and the cycle starts all over again. I would almost argue that these emotional struggles could be the fifth obstacle that most of us will face on the road to an inspired retirement, because these emotions, if not handled properly, could be just as damaging to our financial futures as any of the obstacles I listed earlier. After all, personal finance is really 80% behavior. It's only 20% head knowledge. And if you're not investing due to these emotions, how long is it going to take you to save for that retirement? Now, you know what? That's a fun question. Let's dig into that. Now let's go back to Joe. He's going to be living on $30,000 a year once he reaches retirement. But how long would it take him to get enough money saved up to be able to live on that $30,000 for even just 10 years, let's say, if he wasn't investing? Say if he just puts all the money in the bank. Well, the banks are paying almost no interest right now, but that may change over the next few years. So let's assume that when Joe retires, the banks are paying 3% interest, just for fun. He would need to save $300,000 in order to make it 10 years in retirement. Now, you might say to yourself, well, that isn't too bad. He had more than $500,000 in the last example. And you're right, but the thing you're missing is that the last example was for a 30-year retirement. So how much would you need to have saved in the bank for a 30-year retirement? As it turns out, he would have to have about $890,000 in savings. That's almost $400,000 more than if he were investing. Now, I don't know about you, but in my world, $400,000 is quite a chunk of change. But getting back on topic, if most of us don't have a plan, the next logical question would be, how do we get one? How do we go from no retirement savings at all to a retirement that's inspired? A retirement that ends up being the best years of our lives as opposed to just the end of our lives. Simple, by following the 5 fundamentals of an inspired retirement. The fundamentals are dreaming, planning, execution, commitment, and vigilance. Dreaming is important because it gives you a vision of what your retirement is going to be like. It gives you something specific to strive for. Chris Hogan talks about dreaming in high definition, because there's a huge difference between the following 2 statements. Statement 1, I want to go sailing and learn something new. And statement 2, I want to move to the Bahamas and go on a cruise while learning a new language. The first statement uses very vague language. It doesn't really paint a picture. The second statement is very specific, and sometimes that can motivate you throughout your working career as you picture all the things you and your family and friends are going to do on that Bahama cruise. Now, planning is where you get together with your spouse or just a friend who can be an accountability partner for you and lay out what you have to do in order to turn your dream life into reality. Commitment is often something that happens during this stage as well. And execution is, of course, the follow-through. It's the years that you're putting in the work investing, avoiding debt, and even continuing to dream because over time, your dream's going to evolve. And finally, vigilance is you realizing that stupid is always lurking around the corner. Because as we saw in my How Much Is That Car Payment Really Costing You video, one stupid decision can have a very detrimental effect on your financial future. So we always need to be on guard against stupid. And before I end the video, I just want to say this. Saving money for retirement doesn't mean you have to put your life on hold. As regular viewers of my channel will know, even one small decision can have a huge effect on your savings for retirement. In my video on How Much Is That Car Payment Really Costing You, we found that just by making that one decision to buy a car with cash, even if it's a used one, and continuing to do that over the course of your working career, could end up netting you more than $1 million by the time you retire. And then of course there is the famous latte factor that a lot of financial professionals champion because of how much a difference even saving $5 a day can make. Heck, if you manage to do that 5 days a week, you could end up with almost $600,000 after 40 years. It's just crazy how much of a difference those small changes can make if continued over time. So you don't have to put your life on hold, but you do have to have a plan. And for the love of God, start now. But that'll just about do it for me today. If you learned something or liked what you saw from this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I've got a lot more of these book summaries coming out in the future, and once again, the links for the book will be in the description below if you want to check it out. And as I said at the start of the video, there's a lot of good information in this book that I just can't cover in one video, so I highly recommend checking it out. But until next time, thanks for watching, and have a great day.